All right. Thank you so much for coming, everyone. Welcome to the Web Scraping Workshop. As a quick outline of what we're going to be covering, we're going to be having a quick introduction. What is web scraping, when to use web scraping, how to web scrape, and then a quick tutorial and example. And then if we have time at the end, we'll have a Q&A. So, as an introduction, my name is Tristan. I'm a fourth year at UCI. I study computer science and I'm in LA right now. So, great. So to quickly start off, I think it's good to kind of define some important key terms. First off, web scraping. It's what the workshop is centered around. It's the process of extracting information that we want out of HTML, so websites mainly. And then kind of what goes hand in hand with web scraping is web crawling. And that's the process of traversing pages on a website by using links within the HTML. So to kind of like visualize what web crawling really means is like if you have like a home page here, a home page can contain like many links to other websites. So like in this case, we have like a website here, here, and here. So what you would do then is you would also make a request from this website to each of the links that you found within the home page. And then as you can imagine, this like increases pretty much exponentially because each of these websites then have links and then you go visit those. So it's a good way to like, you know, kind of go over like as many like links within a domain as possible and kind of scrape everything you want out of it. And if you're interested in that, there's a link here, which I got kind of some of the definitions and some of the information from if you want to go check out a little bit more about that. So in our tutorial, we'll be covering both, or like a little brief example of what both is. And then now when to use web scraping. To be honest, I think the use cases for web scraping are becoming increasingly more limited because of the amount of APIs that are being created, but I'll get to that in a little bit. So first, maybe a good use case for web scraping is creating a search engine. So Google's web scrapes pretty much everything on the web. That's how they're able to like provide links to everything. And if you're interested in making your own search engine and learning more about web scraping, I recommend that you take CS 121, which is an upper div. You have a project where you create your own search engine and kind of learn more about how that works and all that. So, and then another use case would be general analytics. So, you know, maybe you want to find information about like the distribution of words on a page, how many times a certain word is used, or the number of links on a page, just general analytics that could be useful in maybe kind of checking out a competitor or, you know, anything like that. And then the use case that we'll be going over, which I think, again, like I mentioned, is becoming increasingly more limited and less useful, is extracting specific data from a page. So this is like you can think of general analytics as very broad, whereas extracting specific data is very niche and you're looking for something that you've probably predefined and set up. Whereas general analytics and creating a search engine, you can kind of set up a general formula and it'll work kind of on most every website. So again, this is like you have to, you know, look at the web page and figure out what you want out of it. So it's on a case-by-case basis. And like I mentioned, HTML format can be inconsistent and change over time. Like, so you don't get to just make one web scraping program and it works on every website, at least if you're trying to extract specific data. You're going to need to make it custom for each website. And sometimes even within the same website, the data layout can be inconsistent. So it can make it really tedious and challenging to scrape out information. You can also use web scraping to kind of create your own API for a website that doesn't have one. If you're unfamiliar with what an API is, it's basically I think it stands for Application Programming Interface, which just is a fancy way of saying it's an easy way to access information. It's a standardized way of accessing information. So what you're doing by creating an API through web scraping is you're taking this unstructured information, right, like HTML, and you're making it structured. So that way, if you're trying to access, maybe you create an API for, you know, some website that you found online. That way, other people can use it, and they don't have to go through the process of web scraping themselves. And again, it's always better to use an API that the website actually provides. There's a lot of reasons for that. One, that they probably, it's more efficient for the website to be able to serve an API rather than have you scrape the HTML. Also, if the content on the HTML changes, the API will probably remain the same, or it'll be easier to adapt to. As you know, like maybe if you try web scraping, a common website like Google or something, though sometimes they shift things around, they change layouts. Anytime they do that, chances are that your web scraping application will probably break. So it's not a good idea to use web scraping unless you like really have to. It's always better to check and make sure that that there isn't an API that's already available before you go ahead and start scraping or creating something to start scraping. All right, poll time. So we're going to be doing kind of a couple polls throughout this workshop just to kind of make sure everyone's engaged and staying focused, and that makes it sound like it's a class, but really it's just to kind of make it a little bit more fun. And that way also maybe you might find out that you have a question through the poll. So I'm going to start, I'm going to release the poll, and then I'm going to start a timer. We'll have 1 minute. There's only 2 questions. And then if you have a question about the questions, message in the chat or unmute yourself, whichever is fine. So I'm going to launch the poll. Let me know if you can't see that, and then I'm going to start the timer. It's pretty intense. So. Pop quiz, exactly. Better have been paying attention. I'll fail you. You get a certificate if you complete the workshop. Nice, 8% completed. 12%. Oh man, 16. Wow, it's going up so fast. Just give it your best shot, Oh, there's a question.
Or not, yeah.
Does that course use web scraping? Yes, it does. I was gonna, yeah, it does. And we've actually been having problems because WebReg has been rate limiting some stuff. So maybe you've seen recently, oh, time's up. Maybe you've seen recently that, an error message that says the request has been blocked, and that's because WebReg has been blocking some of the requests. Yeah, they really did. All right, I'm going to stop the poll here. I think only 79% of people were able to finish, but that's okay. Maybe you'll get to the next one. Let me see if I can. Okay, I'm going to share the results so that way everyone can see them. So the first question was, what is the difference between web scraping and web crawling? So the correct answer is the second one. I mean, this is pretty much just the definition. Web scrapers collect data, while web crawlers traverse web pages. They crawl. And then for the second question, when should web scraping be used? Select all that, apply. So yeah, this one's a little bit tricky. I think pretty much all of these apply, and you might be able to argue that the second one also applies, but I was trying to get all of them except for the second one. So if you're trying to make a better search engine, that's valid, right? You like I mentioned, one of the use cases behind web scraping is to create a search engine. Anytime I want information for a website, the reason why I think that might not be right is because, again, you always want to make sure that there's an API available. So in the case that there is an API available, you wouldn't want to use web scraping. And then when I'm trying to count the number of times it appears on a UCI's website, that's also good for analytics. And then when the website does not have an API available is usually like the main use case. All right, cool. Let's move on. Oh, nope. All right, cool. So how to scrape a website. So we've gone over what web scraping is and web crawling and all that, but like, how do we actually do it? So first, I kind of want to also talk about like the difference between dynamic and static websites, because it impacts the way that you're going to be scraping websites. So a dynamic website is a website that requires JavaScript to execute for everything to render on a page. It's the way the majority of modern websites are created. If you go back maybe like 10 years, I'd say it would probably be the inverse. I think most websites probably would be like, or maybe even 15 years. Most websites are like static websites that don't use JavaScript really at all. It's just all HTML that is generated on page load or just from the page request. Nowadays, though, like there's a lot of frameworks and libraries that are written in JavaScript, so that when you first access the page is initially empty, but because the JavaScript executes, it renders all of the elements on the page. So what this means is that if you don't execute the JavaScript, it'll end up looking like an empty page. And so like I mentioned, most websites use this, and one in particular is HackUCI's website, and this is actually the website that we're going to be scraping from. Can you guys still see my screen, right?
Yep.
Nice. All right. I just want to quickly show you. So your browser is a tool that executes the JavaScript for you. There's another tool that you can use, and it's called Postman. And what that does is it simply just makes a normal HTTP request. It doesn't execute any of the JavaScript. And you'll see that that's a problem, because if I were to make a request here, right, it's to the same website. You'll notice that like along with all this like HTML here, we have the headers and then the body, you'll notice that the body's actually empty. Whereas if we inspect the HTML in the browser, you'll notice that within the body, right? So you can see that they're pretty similar here. We have the head and then the body, the head and then the body. Actually, let me make this a little bigger so you can see it. So you have the head and the body. This time though, there's a ton of stuff in here. And the reason why there's a ton of stuff is because the JavaScript executed and rendered all the elements within the page. So that's why, like, if you just try to make a request to a website to scrape it, like maybe using like the Python library's request or something, you'll end up getting something that looks like this, and there won't be anything on in the request that's useful. You really want the JavaScript to execute so you can retrieve all the elements and information on the page. All right, cool. So that's something important. We'll kind of talk about, like, if we have to execute the JavaScript, how do we do that in code using Python? And there's a tool that we'll use and I'll talk about in the next slide. And then also another strategy for scraping a website is you want to try to find a pattern in the website layout to kind of reduce the amount of manual work you have to do. And like I mentioned on before, this can be really tricky because a lot of websites don't follow a consistent pattern a lot of the time. The website's layout, when you navigate from one page to another, can be completely different. Like if we go look on this page, the welcome page looks a lot different than the logistics page, right? So depending on what you're trying to extract out of the website, you want to try to come up with a pattern as general as possible that still allows you to extract everything that you want. And that sounds really vague and hard, and it kind of is, to be honest. And it's very on a case-by-case basis. Sometimes it's not even possible to come up with a nice pattern. Sometimes you have to do pretty much everything manually. You'll have to, specifically seek out all the HTML that you're looking to extract. And the worst part of this is you can spend hours trying to come up with something to web scrape, and if they push an update for the website and they change all the HTML, pretty much all of that work is going to have to be redone to a certain degree to update where everything was shifted around and all that. So to kind of go into what web scraping tools that we have, knowing that there are going to be dynamic websites and all that. So one thing is Selenium, and Selenium is a tool to automate a browser and be able to pretty much manipulate a browser using Python code. So you'll see in a second when we do the example, but it's literally a browser that pops up on your screen, and you can have actions like navigating to a page, which simulates almost like a page click and does all of that. So, and then in addition to that, you can also scrape the HTML or retrieve the HTML that's currently on the page. And that will make sure that the JavaScript executes and that you can actually get all of the elements after, for a dynamic website after the page loads. And then we'll also use Beautiful Soup, which is a library which kind of helps turn a large string, which is all the HTML, into objects that we can kind of search through and parse really easily. And then Google Chrome, which I I'm sure many of you are using. Maybe though you haven't used the inspect feature, which is, here, let me escape out of this, which is what I did here. If you right click any part of a page, you can do right click inspect, and then this thing pops up and you can kind of check out the HTML and see like, oh, what's inside here. Oh, and as you hover over things, it shows on the page, it kind of like this. And that way you can see like how the HTML is structured. And it's a really nice tool for web development as well. And then we also have regular expressions, which are used to kind of filter and match through text that we're interested in. If you've taken ICS 33, you might have some experience with this. All right, we have another poll. Let me quickly open this guy up. All right, it should be open. If it's not, you know. We got a different minute countdown. This one seems a little chiller, I think. %. You guys can do it.
We got a question. Does Chrome's inspection feature have any advantages over Firefox's?
I don't think so. I think you can use whichever ones. I've done a lot of, I just have a preference for Chrome's, I guess, just because it's the one that I use the most. But I think that they're pretty much equivalent in terms of what they can do. Yeah. All right, cool. Let me end the poll and then I'll share the results.
1 minute timer bomb.
All right, so why do we use Selenium to help scrape information from a website? And the answer I was looking for was it executes JavaScript, which allows for dynamic websites to load in information. I noticed a couple of people picked it compiles the HTML so that the website's information can be extracted. This is kind of like a, so HTML doesn't actually get compiled, and it doesn't really so much have to do, we don't use Selenium for the HTML aspect, more the JavaScript, and then allows us to use regex. You don't have to use Selenium to use regex. You can use regex on pretty much any text. And then scraping a website is always better than using an API. And then, yeah, it's false because it takes more time to develop and can, oh, I think that question got cut off. But it takes more time to develop and can, I think, break easily. I think that was the other half of that question. All right, let's go move on. Nope. All right, so what are we doing? What's the project that we're going to be showing? So this is kind of a hypothetical situation, since this recruitment information I don't think is currently up to date or available, I believe. But it's just a website that we can practice web scraping on. So we're going to scrape all the positions that are currently open within Hack@UCI. So we have different teams at Hack@UCI. We have logistics team, corporate team, marketing, and technology. And then within each of those teams, there are positions open. So like, for example, under the logistics team, there would be general logistics organizer, and they have a description of the role, the name of the role, some qualifications, and then a link to the prompt. So we're going to want to extract all of that information in a nice, like, neat, orderly way. And we're going to want to make it so it works on all the pages. So we only write one code and it works for each of the committees. And then we want to save this information in a CSV file, which is just a comma separated values file, which just means it's like a table, but it's separated by commas. And I'll show a little bit what that means. Yeah, there's a link posted in the chat if you're interested. And that was actually the website I just had shown you. It's this one here. So, all right, so what's the plan? How are we going to actually scrape the information? So we're going to use Selenium to get the HTML at that URL. And then we're going to use Beautiful Soup to convert the HTML that we get into a soup Python object, which allows us to kind of filter through and find the elements that we want. And then we're going to use Chrome to inspect the website and see where the things that we are actually located and how we can identify them in the HTML uniquely. And then we're going to use, again, another soup Python object to extract the elements. And then we're going to use regex to kind of help filter out the text that we're looking for. So the web crawling part of this is we're going to be starting off on the /recruit page. And then we're going to find links within the /recruit page that takes us to each of those committees, right? Because we want to find all the jobs available on each of these subpages. And so rather than, like having a list of all the pages, it'd be nice if we can just start off on one page that'll go to each of these pages, kind of complete the task of scraping off the roles, move on to the next page, move on to the next page, move on to the next page. And this way, if we add a new club, maybe fundraising or something. I think that would be part of one of the clubs that already exists. But let's say we add a new category. This would handle that change very well, as long as the new page is formatted the same way. The /recruit page would be able to find that new fundraising page and scrape off the roles from there as well. So that's kind of an advantage of web crawling, is that it kind of helps adapt to changes in the website a little bit. But yeah. All right, let's check out the code. So the link is there. Maybe the link can get also posted in the Zoom chat. I think I'll quickly try to go over how to set it up. There's a within the Git repo, there's some instructions on how to do that. Again, the two prerequisites is to make sure that you have Python 3 installed and that you have the latest version of Chrome. The reason why you need the latest version of Chrome is because Selenium uses your Chrome installation in order to run that browser that we automate using Python code. And then it talks about how to download the project and all of that. I'll quickly, actually, I'll do it really quick. So you'll want to open up the terminal. I'm just going to navigate to a folder where I want to put the thing in, the repo. Just call new folder. There we go. I'm going to cd into this, and then I'm going to git clone. I'm going to follow the line here, which is git clone. I'm going to copy paste that, and I'm just going to throw it in there, and it's cloning into a new folder called Learn Web Scraping Template. I'm going to cd into that folder, which means change directory. And now I am in that directory. All right, so now that I have the code downloaded, I'm going to open it up in VS Code, which is just a tool that you can use to open up code, and it's nice for debugging and all that. I use it for pretty much anything. I recommend maybe you use it too. So once you get there, you can open up the terminal. Okay, now what's the next set of instructions? We're going to want to create a virtual environment. There's two different sets of instructions here for depending on if you're on Windows and Mac. If the Windows one doesn't work, let us know and we'll update it. I don't have a Windows computer, so I think that they do though. I think we tried it out. And then, so that created a virtual environment. You can see there's a folder called env. It's using a module called venv to create a folder called env, which is where all of the project dependencies will be installed. And then you need to activate the virtual environment by using this command here. See if I can make this a little bit bigger. Ooh, too big. And then you'll know that the virtual environment is activated because it's got the little parentheses env here. And once you have your virtual environment activated, you can go ahead and install all the project dependencies by running that command. And once you get that, it should look good. All right, and then we can quickly run the project. I'll obviously go over what's inside the project, but it should work. And what's cool is you should just see a browser pop up. It's literally, and you'll see it go to each page. So it's going to the logistics page, next it'll go to the corporate page, then it'll go to the marketing page, and then the technology page. So it's literally controlling a browser, and then it closes once it's done. So yeah, maybe if you want to try following along and try to get that installed on your own, or you can do it later, it's up to you. There's also a little bit more information down here about Selenium and Beautiful Soup if you're interested. All right. All right. Actually here, let's see what the result looks like. So like I mentioned, we saved all the information in a CSV file, which again means comma separated value. So this is the header. So we have the role, comma, description, comma, qualifications, comma, prompt. And and you can kind of think of it as like a table. It's kind of hard to read because, you know, the line goes on for so long, but the role corresponds to the first element before the comma. So in this case, the role would be general logistics organizer. Then after that, there's a description, which is a long string. There's a nice plugin on VS Code called Excel Viewer, I think, which allows you to view the CSV in kind of a nicer table. So if you look at this like this, it's a little bit cleaner to look at. It's still not perfect because the lines are so long, but at least it kind of, this is how you should be looking at a CSV. You can also open it in Excel, and I think it'll kind of do the same thing, but at least this way I don't have to open up a new program. All right, let's take a look at the code now. All right, can everyone see the code okay? Might be a little, I'm gonna kind of shrink this down and do that. All right, so the first thing that we do is in order for this to work on all platforms or all operating systems, we want to check, and this is just for the web scraper itself, we want to check what current operating system that you have. So by default, I set it to the Windows one. Within this, we provided all of the Chrome drivers. You can get these from Selenium's website, or if you Google like Selenium Chrome driver, I think it'll be like the first thing that pops up, and I just download them and put them in the Git repo so that you don't have to do that yourselves. So it defaults by setting it to the windows.exe one. And then if Python checks to see if your operating system has a name that starts with Darwin, and that's Mac OS's operating system. So in that case, if it does, then it uses the Mac one. And then if it starts with Linux, it uses the Linux one. And then after that, it creates the actual web driver for Chrome using this file name. And that's the window that you saw pop up. And then we actually need to go get the HTML. So this is where we created like a little helper function here called get HTML. We click on that, we can kind of check out what's inside. So if we click on that, we can kind of check out what's inside. And what we do is we just do a simple GET request that based on the URL, it just appends on the path. And then in this case, the path is /recruit. So we append on /recruit at the end of the base URL here. So the final thing would look something like this, right? And then we do a sleep here, which it seems a little weird, but the reason why we do a sleep is because we want the JavaScript to finish executing. So we give it a buffer time of 2 seconds to completely finish rendering the page, because we don't know if the page has completed executing and finished running all the JavaScript, because if the page that we're going to makes like network requests in the JavaScript, those requests can take an undefined number of seconds, right? Maybe the website itself is retrieving information from an API, and that API is super slow and it takes like 5 seconds or something. In that case, we wouldn't get it. But 2 seconds is generally good enough. Most websites are completely finished loading in 2 seconds. So, I mean, if you want, you can bump it up a little bit, but 2 seconds is usually a good buffer. And then once we wait those 2 seconds, we then extract all the HTML, which we do driver.find element by tag name HTML and then get inner HTML. And what that means is, don't worry too much about it, but there's an HTML tag here, and we're saying get everything within the HTML tag, which is everything. It includes the head and includes the body. So that's kind of how we get the HTML. Right now, it's still a big string in Python. And here we can actually we can add a little breakpoint. That's the nice thing about VS Code is it's super easy to debug. We can have it run a Python file. Just click on that, and now we've got the configuration set up, and you saw me click to the left of this line, and that adds a breakpoint, and we'll just hit play, and it did not work because I think I did not set my project environment to the virtual environment that I had created. So if you want to do that, you click the little Python down here, and you select that in virtual environment that we had created earlier. Let's see if it works now. And allow. All right, so that pop-up happened, and then it hit the breakpoint, which is this yellow bar here. And this way we can kind of hover over it, and there, see this super long string, which is the HTML. And obviously this is like unreadable, and you don't want to be parsing this by hand in Python. That would be kind of a pain. So we use Beautiful Soup, which converts this text into an object that we can kind of better access. So now if we hover over soup, it's this big object, which you don't have to look too much into. But okay, so now we have this Beautiful Soup object. Now we want to actually start extracting the information that we want, and we have to know what we're even looking for, right? So how are we going to, remember the plan was that we were going to start off on this recruit page, and then we're going to get the links. We're going to get the logistics, corporate, marketing, and technology links. The way that we're going to do that is we can just look on the page and think like, okay, how do we get there? Like where are links? Well, I think the nav bar is probably a good place to get those links. You know, when you click on each of these pages or each of these links, that contains the link to the thing that we're looking for. So what you can do is if you're interested in a certain page, depending on where you right click inspect, it'll open up the inspect menu with that place kind of like pre-selected. So you saw that I right clicked the logistics button and it like selected this within the inspect view. And you can kind of confirm that that's right by hovering over each different element. So you can kind of see it select each button. And then the part that we're mainly interested in is the href equals recruit/logistics, right? Because that's going to be the URL we're looking for. This is a relative URL, which means that it doesn't contain like this first part of the URL. But what you can assume then is that this basically just gets appended on at the end of the .com. So in this case, it would be .com/recruit/logistics. Or you can actually see it when I hover over it. There's a little pop-up. That's what it would be if the relative URL gets appended onto the domain. So since we know that they're relative URLs, we can go ahead and iterate, or we can try to find this HTML element and then extract that href from each of these HTML elements. And so the way that we want to do that, right, is we need to find some kind of like uniquely identifying part of this, this HTML. So one thing is that all of these links are within a div that has a class called navbar menu, right? Now, you might want to check to make sure that this is the only div with the class navbar menu. I know it is because I checked to make sure, but when you're web scraping a website that you might not be familiar with, you might want to check to make sure. You can also just try it out, you know, and see if it works. But what you can do is with the soup, you can do soup.find div, which is the tag. The tag is the part of the HTML that so like this is div, this would be a div tag. This is an A tag. Let's see if I can find another one. There's a lot of div tags here, and then HTML tag. So it's just the kind of the first part of it that's right after the less than symbol. So we're going to find a div tag that has a class navbar menu. So like we just saw, this has two classes. It has navbar menu and then a space and then an ng scope class. This kind of find here will match this because it's a div and it has a navbar menu. It also has another class, but as long as it's a div and it has this class, then it'll get matched. So here, let's go into the next line. Let's see what happens when we select that. So this is still a little hard to read. We'll get back to this in a second. What we also want to do then is if we iterate over, here, let me expand this a little bit. If we iterate over each of these A tags, you'll notice that there's a couple that we're actually not interested in. We're not interested in the /recruit one, right? Because that's the page we're currently on. And we're not interested on the event one, right? Because the event one just takes us to HackUCI, which is, our event, the hackathon that we put on every year. And there's not going to be any job positions on there. So we're really just interested in the four buttons we have here. So again, if I right click on this, so what we use is regex, which again is a regular expression, and we're going to set up one that matches it so that the href has to match a /recruit and then some text. And that's what we can see here. We have /recruit and then A through Z. We're accepting any letter A through Z, and we're expecting one or more of those letters that fit within A through Z. So, like something like /logistics, since all the letters of logistics are within A through Z, and there's logistics has at least one letter, this will get matched. So that's the way we kind of filter out like the unwanted links or unwanted text, I guess, because the href is just going to be text that we're looking for, right? We just want to make sure that we filter out like stuff like /recruit, because as you can see, there isn't anything, well, it doesn't have a second slash, first of all, and it doesn't have anything after the slash, which would mean that this regex would not match against that. So that gets rid of that one. And then the /event one doesn't even, or it's, I get in this case, is just slash. It doesn't even have /recruit, so it would also not match. So that's kind of like a way that you can kind of filter some of the results. Now, the way that we actually get those hrefs is we have this navbar menu, right, that we found using the div and the class navbar menu. What you can then do is within this object, do a second search so that the scope is a little bit smaller, right? Right now, you can kind of think of it, we're just looking at this section here, right? But that's what this navbar menu variable means. We're just looking within here. And then within that, we're saying, find all the elements within this where this predicate is true. And we're using a lambda here, which is basically a function in one line. What that means is that anytime an element is found within this, it gets checked against this predicate to make sure that it evaluates to true. So anytime any element, so for each one of these A tags, because there's only how many elements? There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 elements within this kind of div here, right? We're going to check that this tag has an href attribute, or has an attribute called href, right? Each one of these do. Href recruit, href equals recruit /logistics, href equals, you get the point. But we're going to make sure that it has to have that href tag, and that the regex that we defined matches with that tag. And we access the attribute by accessing it as if it were a dictionary. We use the brackets and then the name of the attribute we're interested in, because we already know that it exists, right? Because this is kind of like a two-part predicate. First, it makes sure that that the tag has this href, or sorry, that the tag has an href attribute, and that it also matches, that the href content matches the regex expression that we had defined earlier. So this will find us all of the relevant tags that we're interested in, right? Or specifically the relative paths, because the navbar contains several, children, I guess you could call them, sub elements of this HTML element, all these A tags. We're extracting out just the href part of it, just the relative paths that we're interested in. So I'm going to add a breakpoint down here, and we're going to see if that completes successfully. So now if we look at href tags, okay, now this looks a little bit easier to look at. So so now we can take a look, and within this we have all these A tags. We have we got 4 of them here. They all have an href element, and they all match based on that regex expression we had talked about earlier. So that initial one, the welcome one got filtered out, and the event one got filtered out. So that means it's working correctly. And then within this, now we actually want to get rid of the soup object, kind of, because right now, again, it's still this kind of complicated soup thing. You know, we got all this, you know, other class stuff in here. We really just want the text, right? We just want that part of the URL. So what we're going to do is, again, index or query, we're going to access only the href attribute, and we're going to put it inside a variable called relative path. We're going to print that out to the console, and then we're going to append that into our list called relative paths. So let's do one. I'm going to add a breakpoint here, and it'll iterate once. So we can see that the first thing that it hit was for logistics. So it was able to find that href tag within the href attribute within the a tag, and it printed it out on the screen, and then it appended it to our list. So I'm going to let it finish. It's going to print out a couple more things, right? It's going to print out one for each of the things that match. So it's going to do one for logistics, corporate, marketing, and technology. So it just printed out, like, you know, a bunch of stuff here. That means it's all working good. Then we have something called field names, and maybe you recognize these words. These were at the top of the CSV file, and this is kind of just the header of the CSV. This is just kind of how generally you format CSVs so that they have like a title for each column. And then we have a function called initialize CSV, which just opens up a file and sets up the CSV file. I'm not going to open that up too much. You can check that out if you're interested. And then now we're going to iterate over each of these relative paths, right? So we've done all the work of you know, scraping out all of the websites. Now we're actually going to do the crawling. We're going to go to each of these pages. So we've already visited the you know, the /recruit page. This is going to look very similar. Now we call get HTML, but with that relative path that we found, right? So rather than just being /recruit, now it's /recruit/logistics, and we're going to get the HTML from that page. And then we're going to do the same thing again. We're going to it hung for a little second, remember, because we're waiting. We put a sleep on it for 2 seconds. And then we're going to create another soup object, because again, we want to be able to extract out more information from this HTML. And then now that, okay, so now we finally have, you know, we're on the logistics page. How do we get the information, like the role name, the description, the key qualifications? How do we get that out? So again, I'm going to right click just like we did with the nav bar, try to figure that out. We're going to look at what makes, you know, the job title the job title. In this case, it makes it pretty easy. It looks like it's just a div with a class called job title. So one thing, though, to consider is whether or not, and again, what you want to do is make sure you check out all the pages before you start web scraping, because we want to try to make something as general as possible that works for all the pages. If we check out something like the marketing page, we'll notice that this one actually has 2 jobs on one page, which means that we'll want to be able to get both of them. So if we look at the HTML again, something, we still have that job title that I was looking at earlier, but something that wraps all of the jobs is a class called job. So within job container, we have a couple different, here, let's see if I can show you it being selected. When I hover over the first job, it kind of selects this entire box. And when I hover over the second one, it selects the entire one below. So what we're going to do is we're going to find all of the jobs or all of the divs with the class job so that we can iterate on them and get all of the available jobs on this page. So in this case, we have 2. If we go back to the logistics one, we'll notice that we only have 1, but that's okay because, again, we're designing it in a way that it can handle 1 or more, basically. So in this case, yeah, there's only 1 job here. And then within the job, we're going to want to get each of the different components that we're looking for, right? We're looking for the role, which is the title, the description, the qualifications, and then the prompt. So let's look within that. So job title looks, or the role looks pretty easy, right? It's just a div called job title. So it's a div called job title, and then we're going to get the text that's within this. To access that, we just do .text, and then we're going to replace all the new line characters with an empty string, which is just a way of removing all of the new line characters essentially. And then we're going to go and we're going to find the description. We can check out within the body here. It looks like we have a couple spans. Span is just another tag in HTML. And it looks like we just find, I believe it looks like all of them. So we have this one and then this one, and we're just going to grab the text, and then similarly, we're going to remove all the new line characters, and then we're going to get all the qualifications. So let's right click inspect. Let's see what makes the qualifications something that we can access easily. This just gets us the title, but how do we get each of the individual qualifications? We open that up, and then we can see there's a bunch of divs with class item. And so that looks pretty perfect. That looks like it gets us each bullet point. So what we do is we made a little helper function here called get qualifications. And what that does is it goes through and it finds within that job, let's see if I can quickly find this big job block, right? It finds all of the, let me close these a little bit. It finds all of the divs within this job block that have the class item. And then for each one of those, it just does the same thing. It gets the inner text, which in this case is like excellent time management skills. And it replaces all the new line characters with empty string, which just removes it. And then we add that all to a list and we return the list. So that's how we get the qualifications. And then the prompt is pretty similar. The prompt is actually a little bit easier because we don't even have to, or I guess actually we do have to, we have to find in case there's multiple links. So we can right click this is the prompt. And in this case, there's only one, but we made this, expandable in the sense that if there are multiple prompts, that it'll find all of them. So again, within the job, this job block that we have, this thing right here, right? It filters it down and it tries to find all of the A tags that, what does this say? Well, I guess it just finds all the A tags. It doesn't even, we don't even have to filter by a class. And in this case, we don't even have a class to filter by, right? Normally, some HTML elements have classes, like the one above it has class prompt. This one doesn't. All it has is an A tag and an href. And so what we do is out of the A tag, we extract that href and then we append it to a list and we take it back to here. So this will get us a list of all the prompts from the A tags. This will get us a list of all of those qualifications, which were all the bullet points. This one will get that description for us and remove all the new lines. And then this will get us the job title. And so after we get that information, we can just write that to our CSV as a row. Here, let's see. If I take us here, I'm going to add a new breakpoint right here. So before it writes to the file, we can check out what this job data dictionary looks like. We have the role, which is general logistics organizer, and then we have a description, which is pretty long, and then we have an array of the qualifications and an array of the prompt, which in this case is just one link. And so it'll do that for each page, and that's pretty much all there is to it. So let's let it run. And then let's check out that CSV file. So I think it's still empty because, let's see, there it goes. Okay, so it just took a second to update. All right, so if we go back to this Excel view, I think we're pretty much done, except there's one problem, it looks like. If you notice, all of these look pretty good, right? We have the role, we have the descriptions, the qualifications, except for these three down here. They have empty arrays. And there's something called key qualifications as a role. So that doesn't make sense, right? You can't have a role that's key qualifications. So that means that there was something within this website that doesn't follow the pattern that the other pages have. And that's actually the corporate page. For whatever reason, this website, they decided to design differently, which again is a big downside to web scraping, is that you pretty much have to handle this edge case manually by doing like an if statement and saying, if we're on the corporate page, do something a little bit different. The pattern that we set up doesn't work for this page. And so you can see that if we look at the key qualifications, it has the div class job title. Well, key qualifications isn't actually a job title. It's just that they're using this div in class. So in that case, you'd have to do something more manual. I'm not going to show that, but I think you get the idea that web scraping, it's good to try to find something that works 90%. And if you're lucky, you'll get 90%. And then the rest of that 10%, you're going to have to do manual little edge cases. You'd have to do like if, job, whatever the role is, if it equals key qualifications or something, then handle it differently. So again, that's a big downside to web scraping, and that's what can make it really tedious. Or if, HackUCI decides to change out this entire layout, maybe they don't use job title as the class anymore. Maybe they use something completely different. It's all, can easily happen, and it does happen. So web scraping is very fragile, and if HackUCI offered an API, you should definitely try to use that instead. But web scraping is always a good skill to have, in case you want to extract out information and there isn't an API available, or you're just trying to get general analytics. It's always good to know how to do that. So I think that pretty much wraps up the tutorial part of this. I'll go into Q&A now. I think that there's only like 6 minutes left. But if anyone has any questions or wants me to go over something again, definitely feel free to ask. We have pretty much no more poll questions that are relevant to the material, but yeah, if does anyone have any questions, or maybe like, oh, I don't know, I don't have any questions to come up with. There's well, if there's no questions, thank you so much. Oh, thank you so much for attending the workshop. Really appreciate you showing up on week 9. Good luck with all your upcoming tests and studying. We have all the links here. Please do try to fill out the feedback form. Maybe we could get that posted in the chat. It really helps with making the workshops as the best that they can be. For example, in the last workshop, we got a lot of good feedback saying that the polls were really helpful, and that's why we did that again this time. So if you still find them helpful, or if you found something that like I went too fast on something, please feel free to leave some feedback, and we'll try to adjust for the next time. So again, thank you so much. We'll stick around for a little bit, and I'll just play some music. And yeah, after this, we're actually going to be also having a Hack Nights event on our Discord channel. So please make sure to come visit that. You can join our Discord by visiting the hack.icsuci.edu, and then joining. You'll be sent a link to Discord where you can come hang out with us for a little bit.
Nicole's typing out a question.
Oh.
Yay!
Taking too long to type out. Thank you.
Yay, thank you for coming.
Thank you for coming. Oh, line 76, you use A through Z to represent a phrase like, oh, okay, yeah. So here, we have some time. So there's a really nice tool called regex 101. I like to use this whenever I try to come up with a regex, because you can really easily try it out. So let me, actually, I'll drop this in the chat too if you're interested. And then if we copy the regex thing that we have here, if we go to the Python tab and then paste in that regular expression, we can give it an input and see if it matches. So like something like this would be valid. If I get rid of the text test, it would not be valid. And so and it even breaks down what the regex means. So in this case, we're doing a range of characters, A through Z, and then the plus is what says that there has to be at least one character. It matches between 1 and unlimited times. So that means like 1 character, A through Z, 1, at least 1, or unlimited times. So since there's not any A through Z character here, it doesn't match. The second I add any character, it works. If I add like a non-A through Z, like a period, it doesn't match. You can see when it turns blue. So yeah, so hopefully that answers your question. Yeah, cool, nice. And then Riley had a question. Are APIs created off web scraping? Or are they something completely different? Yeah, so typically APIs are made by the website or the company who's hosting it. They don't typically scrape themselves. They since they have access to the raw information that the HTML is probably even generated from, they can just serve that to you as a JSON object, or yeah, typically it's in JSON, and it's a lot more efficient that way, because then you don't have to deal with, oh, I have to find a div that has a specific class, and I have to go filter that, and I have to use Selenium to execute all the JavaScript. It's just way easier to use an API. So yeah, it is. I would say they're pretty different in that sense, the way that APIs are created. Typically, the reason why you would create an API, like for example, like a WebSock, right, which is UCI's schedule of classes. Unfortunately, UCI doesn't offer an API. So what many students have been doing is creating their own API, which it just scrapes the HTML and converts it into a JSON object. That way, either other students can access it really easily, or you can. It's just easier to manipulate in general. So, does anyone else have any questions? Hopefully, I answered your question, Riley. Any advice for starting personal projects? Yeah. So for starting a personal project, I think that like if you find anything that you're interested in, like either like a problem that you have personally, like maybe you have an issue with like a website you're using, or you want to make something a little bit easier. I think that's always a good way to go, because then you have the motivation that you really want to have. You want to find a way to finish this personal project. I think that's the most, like, if you can find motivation or like something to make something useful, I think those are the best personal projects, because it'll keep you going. Whereas like if you try to make something that's already been done, like it's always good to do that, but I feel like it's easy to lose motivation because you're like, oh, what's the point in even continuing, because it's already been done a million times. So trying to find something that is beneficial to you personally, is like making like a website or a tool, is I think the way to go, just because you kind of push yourself in that way, or at least hopefully. How often do you web scrape on a regular basis? Oh, compared to use, I would say like, I mean, the only, a big exception to that is Zot course, which is a schedule planner for UCI that I made. That's almost entirely web scraping, because UCI doesn't have an API. But I'd say outside of that, I'd say like 95% of the time you use an API, because APIs have become so common, where most websites offer like a tier for free, where you can make like maybe like 500 requests a day for free. And I mean, I never surpassed that. So, and typically if they offer an API, they don't want you web scraping, and they make it very hard to web scrape, or it wouldn't make sense to. So yeah, most of the time though, you're going to be using an API over web scraping. It's just, and it's becoming more rare. Web scraping is becoming more rare over time, because so many companies are providing APIs for free. Web scraping now, I think, is mainly used for analytics and creating a search engine. So. Yep.
Oh.
All right. I think that we'll end it off here then, if there's no more questions, and we'll hop into the Discord.
Yeah, join us in the Discord.
Yep. All right. Well, thank you so much, guys, for coming. We hope to see you at the next hack workshop.